The shuttle was small and lonely against the endless black of space. Inside, Lieutenant sat perfectly still. Her hands rested on her knees. Her breathing was slow and calm, but her heart was beating fast and she could feel the cold sweat on her palms. She was 23 years old. She had joined the United Earth Corps when she was 18. She had learned 7 alien languages. She had studied the cultures of 30 different species, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. Through the small window, she could see the flagship growing larger. It was called the Crimson Tide, and it was the most feared ship in 3 star systems. The vessel was massive and dark red, shaped like a giant insect with sharp edges and long metal spines. Lights blinked along its surface like angry eyes watching her approach. "Earth Station to Lieutenant," a voice crackled through her communicator. "You are approaching the docking zone. Do you copy?" Press the button on her collar. "I copy, Earth Station, beginning final approach now." There was a pause, then a different voice came through. It was Commander, and she could hear the worry in his words even through the static. He said quietly, "You can still turn back. We can find another way." She smiled, though no one could see it. "No, Commander, they asked for one human. They said they wanted to talk peace. If I don't go, they will say we refused. They will use it as an excuse for war." "And if it's a trap?" Touched the small scar below her ribs. Beneath her skin, hidden deep in her body, was a tiny device. It was smaller than a grain of rice, but it could do many things. "Then I will handle it," she said. The shuttle shook as it entered the docking bay of the Crimson Tide, stood up and checked her uniform one last time. It was simple and clean, with the Earth symbol on her shoulder. She carried no weapons. This was supposed to be a peaceful meeting. The door opened with a hiss of air. They were waiting for her. There were tall creatures, nearly 8 feet high. Their bodies were covered in hard red shells, like the armor of insects. They had 4 arms and 2 legs, and their faces were nightmares of clicking mandibles and small, cruel eyes. The soldiers wore black metal plates on their chests, and they carried weapons that hummed with energy. Stepped out of the shuttle, she kept her face calm. She had practiced this many times in front of a mirror. Show no fear, show no weakness. These creatures respected only strength. "I am Lieutenant of the United Earth Corps," she said clearly. "I am here to meet with the High Arbiter for diplomatic discussions." The soldiers did not answer. They stared at her with those cold, dead eyes. Then slowly they began to move closer. Felt her heart jump. Something was wrong. "I said I am here for diplomatic discussions," she repeated. "Take me to the High Arbiter." One of the soldiers made a sound. It took her a moment to realize it was laughter. "Foolish human," the soldier said. Its voice was like rocks grinding together. "There will be no discussion." They grabbed her. Did not fight. She could not fight. There were 6 of them, and each one was 3 times her size. Their claws dug into her arms as they lifted her off her feet. She felt her uniform tear. She felt pain shoot through her shoulders. But she did not scream, not yet. They dragged her through dark hallways that smelled of metal and something rotten. Others watched from the shadows, their mandibles clicking with excitement, counted the turns. Left, right, left, down a long ramp. Her training never stopped, even now. Finally, they entered a large room. It was cold and bright, with harsh white lights that hurt her eyes. In the center was a metal table. It was tilted at an angle, and there were straps on it. Straps for arms, straps for legs, straps for the neck. Behind the table stood unlike the others. It was larger, older, with golden markings on its shell. This was the High Arbiter, the leader of the fleet. "So," the High Arbiter said, looking at like she was a small insect, "this is what Earth sends us. A child." Lifted her chin. "I am a representative of the United Earth Corps. Whatever you do to me will be considered an act of war." The High Arbiter laughed. It was an ugly sound. "War," it said. "We are not worried about war with humans. Your species is weak, soft. You break too easily. It stepped closer and could smell its breath, hot and sour. "But we are curious. We want to see exactly how easily you break." It gestured to the soldiers. "Prepare the broadcast." Blood went cold. Broadcast. Within minutes, she understood. Large machines were brought into the room. Screens flickered to life. They were going to show this to everyone, every ship in their fleet, every station in their territory, perhaps even to Earth itself. They wanted to make an example of her. They stripped off her jacket and strapped her to the table. The metal was freezing against her bare skin. She pulled against the restraints, but they were too tight. She could not move. The High Arbiter walked to a table covered with instruments. Some of them glowed. Some of them had sharp edges. All of them were designed to cause pain. "Humans think they are special," the High Arbiter said, picking up a small device that crackled with electricity. "They think they can walk among the stars like they belong here, but you are nothing. You are flesh and water and weakness. And tonight, everyone will see the truth." The broadcast began. A red light blinked on the camera. Somewhere out there, Commander was watching. Ensign was watching. Millions of humans and aliens across the galaxy were watching. The first shock hit spine. She screamed. The pain was like fire and ice at the same time. It traveled through every nerve in her body. She could feel her muscles tighten until she thought her bones would break. Tears poured from her eyes. They watched with satisfaction. The High Arbiter leaned close to the camera. "This is humanity," it said. "Listen to her scream. Watch her cry. Remember this the next time Earth tries to pretend they are equal to the Dominion." The second shock came, then the third. Each one was worse than the last. Far away on Earth Station, Commander gripped the edge of his console so hard his knuckles turned white. Ensign was crying silently, unable to look away from the screen. "We have to do something," whispered. "We have to save her." Shook his head slowly. His face was pale, but his eyes were strange. They were not filled with despair. They were filled with something else. "No," he said quietly. "We wait." Stared at him. "Wait, they're killing her." Turned to look at the young ensign. His voice was barely above a whisper. Knew this might happen. She planned for it. She volunteered for it. He looked back at the screen where his body twisted in agony. "This is not a torture session, Ensign. This is a mission, and is completing it exactly as planned." On the screen, screamed again. But deep inside her body, beneath her seventh rib, a tiny device began to record everything. The pain never stopped. It came in waves, each one bigger than the last. Lost track of time. She lost track of where she was. All she knew was the fire burning through her body and the cold metal beneath her back. They were experts at causing suffering. They had done this many times before, to many different species. They knew exactly how much pain a body could take before it broke completely, and they were careful to stay just below that line. They wanted to suffer for a long time. 15 minutes passed. They used chemicals that made her nerves burn like hot wires. They used machines that sent electricity through her muscles until they cramped and twisted. They cut her with small blades that left thin red lines across her skin. Each cut was shallow, but each one felt like it went all the way to her soul. Through it all, the cameras kept recording. The broadcast kept playing. Across the galaxy, beings of every species watched in horror or delight, depending on who they were. On Earth Station, the crew stood frozen at their posts. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched the screen, unable to look away from their colleagues' suffering. Commander had not moved from his spot. His face was like stone, but inside his heart was breaking. He had known since she was a young cadet. He had watched her grow from a shy teenager into a brilliant officer. And now he was watching her be tortured, and he could do nothing to stop it. No, that was not true. He could stop it. He could order the fleet to attack. But that would mean war and millions would die. They had many ships, many soldiers. Earth was not ready for that fight. Not yet. So he stood and watched, and he waited. 20 minutes passed. Screams had become weaker. Her voice was raw and broken from crying out. Blood dripped from the corners of her mouth where she had bitten her own lip. Her eyes were swollen from tears. The High Arbiter stood over her, studying her like a scientist studying a dying animal. "Impressive," it said. "Most species lose consciousness after 10 minutes, but you are still awake, still aware." Its mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "Perhaps humans are not completely worthless after all. You make excellent subjects for study." It picked up another instrument. This one was different from the others. It was a thin needle attached to a small machine. "This device stimulates the pain centers of the brain directly," the High Arbiter explained, holding it up to the camera. "The body feels nothing, but the mind experiences pain beyond anything physical torture can create. Many subjects go insane within seconds." It leaned closer to, "Let us see what happens to a human mind." The needle went into her temple. Did not scream this time. She could not. The pain was too big for screaming. It was like every terrible moment of her life was happening at once. Every fear, every sadness, every hurt she had ever felt came crashing down on her at the same time. She saw her parents, dead in a transport accident when she was 12. She saw her brother, lost in the war with the... She saw every failure, every rejection, every moment of loneliness that had ever touched her life. And behind it all, she felt the weight of billions of people counting on her. Billions of humans who would suffer if she failed. The weight was crushing. It was impossible. No one could carry such a burden. 25 minutes passed. The High Arbiter frowned. Something was wrong. Vital signs were displayed on a screen nearby. Her heart rate had been fast and irregular, as expected. Her brain activity had been chaotic, showing the patterns of extreme distress. But now something was changing. Her heart rate was slowing. Her brain patterns were becoming more organized, more calm. "What is happening?" the High Arbiter demanded. "Increase the intensity." The technicians obeyed. They pushed the machines harder. The readings spiked for a moment. Then's heart rate dropped even lower. Her breathing became slow and steady. And she stopped screaming. 31 minutes had passed. The room fell silent. The soldiers looked at each other in confusion. The High Arbiter stared at the human on the table, trying to understand what it was seeing. His eyes were open. They were no longer filled with pain or fear. They were clear and calm, like deep water on a still day. And she was smiling. "What trickery is this?" the High Arbiter hissed. "No creature can overcome the neural stimulator. It is impossible." Turned her head slowly to look at the alien leader. Her voice, when it came, was soft and steady. "You do not understand humans at all," she said. The High Arbiter took a step back. For the first time, there was uncertainty in its eyes. "Your machines cause pain," continued, "but pain is nothing new to us. We are born in pain. We live with pain. We make pain our friend when we have no other choice." She smiled wider. "You think you are breaking me, but all you are doing is making me stronger." The High Arbiter's mandibles clicked rapidly. "She is bluffing. She is trying to trick us. Increase the power to maximum." The technicians looked at each other nervously. Maximum power had never been used on a living subject. It would either kill her instantly or destroy her mind completely. They obeyed. The machine screamed. The lights flickered. Enough power to run a small city poured through the needles and into his brain. She laughed. It was not a crazy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who knows a secret that no one else knows. The laugh of someone who has already won. 37 minutes, she said, her eyes never leaving the High Arbiter. "That is how long it takes." "How long what takes?" the High Arbiter demanded. "What are you talking about?" Deep inside its body, the tiny device beneath her rib cage sent out a signal. It was a simple signal, just a series of numbers. But those numbers traveled across space faster than light, bouncing from relay to relay until they reached a ship hidden in the shadow of a nearby moon. The ship had been waiting there for hours. Its crew had been watching the broadcast like everyone else, but unlike everyone else, they had been waiting for this exact moment. Captain Minu stood on the bridge, his hand hovering over a control panel. When the signal came, he did not hesitate. "All systems to attack mode," he said calmly. "Execute protocol sunrise." The ship moved out of the shadow. It was not alone. 11 other ships appeared beside it, all of them painted black, all of them invisible to sensors until now. They did not fire weapons. They did not need to. Instead, they activated a device that Earth had been developing in secret for 10 years. It was called the Null Pulse, and it had never been used in combat before. The pulse spread outward like a wave. It passed through the hull of the Crimson Tide without slowing down. It touched every wire, every circuit, every power cell on the ship. And everything stopped. The lights went out. The machines went silent. The cameras stopped recording. The soldiers staggered as their powered armor became dead weight on their bodies. In the darkness, heard the High Arbiter screaming orders that no one could follow. Then she heard something else, a hissing sound coming from all around her. The airlocks were opening. Smiled and closed her eyes. Help was coming. She had completed her mission. Everything that happened next would be up to others. As the first blast of cold vacuum air touched her face, she whispered a single word. "Checkmate." The rescue took less than 10 minutes. When the null pulse hit the Crimson Tide, it did not just turn off the power. It scrambled every electronic system on the ship. The soldiers could not use their weapons. They could not use their communicators. They could not even open doors. But the Earth soldiers had been prepared. Their suits used a different kind of technology, older and simpler, based on mechanical systems instead of electronic ones. The null pulse did not touch them. They moved through the dark hallways of the flagship like shadows. They knew exactly where to go. Implant had been sending them information for 37 minutes. They had maps. They had positions. They had everything they needed. Private was the first to reach the torture chamber. She was young, only 19, but she had been training for combat since she was 15. Her heart was pounding as she kicked open the door, but her hands were steady on her weapon. The room was chaos. Soldiers stumbled around in the darkness, their armor weighing them down like stone. The machines were silent. The only light came from emergency strips along the walls, casting everything in a dim red glow. And there, still strapped to the table, was Lieutenant. Ran to her side. "Lieutenant, can you hear me?" Opened her eyes. They were tired and filled with pain, but there was a smile on her cracked lips. "Took you long enough," she whispered. Cut the straps with her knife. Other soldiers poured into the room, securing and covering the exits. Within seconds, they had in their arms and were carrying her toward the extraction point. Behind them, the High Arbiter screamed with rage. "You cannot do this. This is an act of war. The Dominion will destroy your entire species." Nobody answered. Nobody cared. 7 hours later, a shuttle docked at Earth Station. The observation deck was crowded. Every officer on the station had come to see the return. Commander stood at the front, his hands clasped behind his back. Ensign was beside him, her eyes red from crying but her face determined. The shuttle door opened. Captain Minu stepped out first. He was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes. He had been commanding rescue missions for 20 years, and he had seen many terrible things. But the look on his face said that today had been different. Behind him came. She walked on her own feet. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood. Her skin was covered with burns and cuts. Her left eye was swollen almost shut, but she walked without help and she held her head high. In her left hand, she carried a small data chip. In her right hand, she carried something that made everyone in the room go silent. It was the communication crest of the High Arbiter, a symbol of absolute authority in the Dominion, and it was covered in dark blue blood. "Lieutenant reporting for duty," she said, her voice rough but clear. "Mission complete." Stepped forward. His eyes were shining with tears he was trying not to show. "Get the medical team," he said now. "No," said she, raised the data chip. "Debrief first, this cannot wait." The room fell silent again. Everyone knew what she had been through. They had all watched the broadcast. The idea that she would delay medical treatment seemed impossible. But she never did things the normal way. Nodded slowly. "Very well, conference room now." 15 minutes later, the senior officers of Earth Station sat around a long table. Stood at the head, a medical officer working on her wounds while she spoke. She inserted the data chip into the console. Holographic images filled the air above the table. Star maps, fleet positions, base coordinates, supply routes, secret communications, everything that had been hiding for centuries. "During the torture," explained, "my implant was recording everything, every word spoken by the High Arbiter, every image displayed on their screens, every signal passing through their communication systems." She pointed to a cluster of points on the star map. "These are their breeding worlds. Without these planets, they cannot replace their soldiers." She pointed to another set of coordinates. "These are their fuel stations. Destroy these and their fleet becomes stranded." She pointed to a third location. "And this is the location of their high command. Every important leader in the Dominion meets here once per year." The officers stared at the display in stunned silence. Admiral, an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "You gathered all this while they were torturing you?" Nodded. "The pain was real, but my implant was designed to work no matter what state my body was in. As long as I remained conscious, it kept recording." She paused. "That is why I could not let myself pass out. That is why I had to endure it." Spoke up, her voice trembling. "But how could you stay conscious through that, the things they did to you?" Was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "When I was 12 years old, my parents died in an accident. I was alone. I had nothing. I thought about giving up many times." She looked at the young ensign. "But I did not give up. I learned that pain does not kill you. Fear does not kill you. Only giving up kills you." She touched the scar on her arm, one of many from tonight. "The thought they were breaking me, but they do not understand what humans are made of. We are not strong despite our pain. We are strong because of it." The room was silent. Then Admiral began to clap. One by one, the other officers joined him, until the sound filled the conference room like thunder. Did not smile. She was too tired for that, but something in her eyes softened just a little. "There is one more thing," she said when the applause died down. She held up the communication crest. "The High Arbiter is dead. I killed him before the extraction." The silence returned, heavier than before. "How?" Minyu asked quietly. His expression did not change. "When the power went out, his personal guard could not protect him. Their armor was too heavy to move without power assist. He tried to run." She set the crest on the table with a soft click. "He did not run fast enough." Admiral exchanged glances with the other senior officers. This changed everything. The death of the High Arbiter would throw the Dominion into chaos. They had no clear succession. Different factions would fight for control. "This buys us time," said slowly. "Years, perhaps, time to build our defenses, time to prepare." Nodded. That was the plan. The Admiral looked at the young lieutenant for a long moment. Then he stood and walked around the table to stand before her. "Lieutenant," he said formally, "on behalf of the United Earth Corps and all of humanity, I thank you. Your courage and sacrifice have given us a chance at survival." He saluted her. After a moment, despite her wounds and exhaustion, saluted back. "I was just doing my job," she said simply. Then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed into the arms of the medical officer who had been waiting for this moment. She had held on long enough, she could finally rest. Station Axiom floated in the empty space between star systems. It was the largest structure ever built by intelligent beings, a massive wheel of metal and glass that spun slowly against the backdrop of distant galaxies. For 10,000 years, it had served as the meeting place of the Galactic Council. Today, it was filled with anger. Representatives from 12 species had gathered in the great chamber at the heart of the station. They sat in curved rows that rose up like the inside of a bowl, each delegation in its own section. Some were giants, tall as trees. Some were small, no bigger than human children. Some had tentacles. Some had wings. Some had no bodies at all, existing only as patterns of light. And at the center of them all, the new ambassador stood on a raised platform, pointing one claw at the human delegation. "Murder," it screamed, its mandibles clicking with fury. "Terrorism. The humans have committed an act of war against a sovereign power. They destroyed a warship. They killed 3,000 crew members. They assassinated the High Arbiter himself." The chamber echoed with sounds of alarm and outrage. Many species had long memories of human aggression. The young race had been in space for less than 500 years, but in that time they had fought 17 wars. They were known for being stubborn, violent, and impossible to predict. The ambassador continued its accusations. "We demand justice. We demand that the humans surrender the criminals responsible. We demand compensation for our losses." From the human section, Admiral rose slowly from his seat. He was an old man. His hair was gray and his face was lined with age. He walked with a slight limp from an old injury that had never fully healed. But his eyes were sharp and clear, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the chamber. "May I respond?" he asked politely. The council moderator, a being of pure energy called the Keeper, flickered in acknowledgement. "You may." Walk to the center platform. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man who had all the time in the universe. When he reached the platform, he stood just a few feet from the ambassador and looked up at it without fear. "You speak of murder," he said. "You speak of terrorism. These are serious accusations." "They are facts," the ambassador snapped. Nodded, perhaps, but let me tell you some other facts. He turned to face the assembled representatives. 3 weeks ago, the Dominion invited Earth to send a diplomatic envoy. They said they wished to discuss peace. They promised safe passage and respectful treatment. He paused. "We sent one person, a young woman named, she was 23 years old. She carried no weapons. She came in peace. And she murdered our leader," the ambassador shrieked. "I am not finished," said, his voice hardening. "When Lieutenant arrived at the flagship, she was immediately taken prisoner. She was stripped of her clothes. She was strapped to a torture table, and for 37 minutes she was subjected to treatments that most species could not survive for 37 seconds. He let that sink in. "But that is not the worst part," he continued. "The worst part is that they did not do this in secret. They broadcast it. They sent it across every communication channel in their territory. They wanted everyone to see a human being tortured. They wanted to humiliate us, to frighten us." He turned back to the ambassador. "So yes, we sent rescue ships. Yes, we disabled your vessel. Yes, our soldiers retrieved our officer. And yes, during that operation your High Arbiter died." His eyes narrowed. "But let me ask you something, Ambassador. What did you think would happen?" The chamber was silent. "You tortured one of our people on live broadcast," said. "You showed the galaxy that you think of humans as weak animals to be hurt for entertainment. Did you really believe we would do nothing?" The ambassador's mandibles clicked nervously. The human knew the risks when she volunteered, interrupted. "Yes, she knew exactly what might happen. That is what humans do, Ambassador. We prepare for the worst. We planned for betrayal, and when you betrayed us, we were ready." A murmur ran through the chamber. Representatives leaned toward each other, whispering in dozens of languages. From the highest row of seats, a voice rang out. It was clear and beautiful, like crystal bells singing together. "I would speak." Everyone turned to look. In the section reserved for the oldest races, a being of crystalline light was rising. This was one of the ancient ones who had traveled between stars when most species were still learning to use fire. The keeper flickered with surprise. They had not spoken in the council for nearly 100 years. "The council recognizes representative of the keeper said. The crystalline being drifted down to the central platform. It had no face, no features that humans could recognize. But somehow, everyone in the chamber knew it was looking at Admiral. "You used your own officer as bait," said. "You sent her into a trap knowing she would suffer." Methus gazed without flinching. "We did not send her, she volunteered. There is a difference." "Is there?" asked. "You knew what would happen to her. You planned for it. You designed implants to record information while she was being tortured. You positioned ships to rescue her at exactly the right moment." The crystalline form pulsed with light. "You turned her suffering into a weapon." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "You are right," he said. "We did all of those things, and I will tell you why." He turned to address the entire council. "Humanity has been in space for 500 years. In that time, we have been invaded 4 times. We have been enslaved twice. We have been the targets of 3 attempted genocides. Every powerful race in this galaxy has looked at us and seen prey." His voice grew stronger. "We learned very quickly that the galaxy does not reward kindness. It does not respect mercy. The only thing it respects is strength. So we became strong. We became prepared. We became survivors." He looked back at. "Yes, Lieutenant suffered, but she chose that suffering. She accepted it willingly because she understood something that many species do not understand about humans." "And what is that?" asked. His voice was soft but certain. "Pain does not destroy us, it forges us. Every cut, every burn, every moment of agony only makes us more determined. The thought they were breaking a human, they were actually creating their own destruction." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. With a tap, holographic images filled the air above the platform. Maps, coordinates, fleet positions, secret documents. "This is everything Lieutenant gathered during her torture," he said. "Every whispered command, every displayed document, every signal that passed through that ship. They showed her their entire military structure while they were hurting her. They thought she was helpless. They were wrong." The ambassador stared at the display in horror. That is impossible. The pain alone would." "Would what?" asked. "Make her lose consciousness, destroy her ability to think." He shook his head. "You still do not understand, Ambassador. Humans have spent 10,000 years learning to survive pain. It is not our weakness. It is our oldest and greatest weapon." He turned off the display and put the device away. "So go ahead," he said to the council. "Condemn us if you must. Punish us for defending our own people. But remember this." He looked slowly around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. "The next time anyone thinks about hurting a human, remember what happened to Remember that 37 minutes of torture gave us the information to destroy an empire." He smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. "Remember what we are." 5 years passed. The galaxy changed in ways that no one had expected. The Dominion, once the most feared power in 3-star systems, had shattered into a dozen warring factions. Without their High Arbiter, without their military secrets, they fought among themselves like children over broken toys. Their empire crumbled like dust in the wind. And in its place, something new rose. The information that Lieutenant had gathered was shared with every species that they had threatened or conquered. Slave planets were liberated. Trade routes were opened. For the first time in centuries, smaller species could travel safely without paying tribute to the Dominion. Earth did not claim credit for any of this. They did not ask for rewards or territories. They simply did what needed to be done and then stepped back. But everyone remembered. In the bars and trade stations of the Outer Rim, a new proverb began to spread. It was spoken in 100 different languages by beings with tentacles, wings, claws, and appendages that humans could not even name. Do not corner a human, they do not break, they adapt. At first, it was spoken as a warning, a reminder that the soft, short-lived creatures from the blue planet were more dangerous than they appeared. But over time, it became something else. It became a sign of respect. Humans were invited to join the Galactic Alliance, not as junior members or observers, but as full partners. They were asked to share their knowledge, their technology, their strange ability to survive anything the universe threw at them. And at the heart of it all, one name was spoken more than any other. Her story spread across the stars like fire across dry grass. Cadets at every military academy studied her mission. Scientists analyzed the implant technology that had turned suffering into intelligence. Philosophers debated the ethics of her sacrifice. Artists created paintings and songs about the woman who had smiled while being tortured. She became more than a person. She became a symbol. But herself wanted none of it. After her recovery, she returned to duty for 3 more years. She led rescue missions. She trained new officers. She helped design better implants so that no one would ever have to suffer as much as she had. And then, on her 35th birthday, she resigned. "I have given enough," she said quietly to Admiral. "Now I want to live." The Admiral understood. He had seen too many heroes burn themselves out trying to be everything to everyone, had earned her peace. She returned to Earth, to a small village on the Korean peninsula where she had grown up. It was a quiet place, surrounded by green mountains and clear rivers. The people there remembered her as the shy little girl who had lost her parents, not as the legend who had changed the course of galactic history. She bought a small farm. She grew vegetables and raised chickens. She taught language courses to children who were preparing to travel to distant colonies. She lived simply and quietly, and she was happy. But sometimes, late at night, the memories would come. She would wake up in a cold sweat, feeling the echoes of pain that had happened years ago. She would see the face of the High Arbiter in her dreams, leaning over her with those cruel, clicking mandibles. She would hear the sound of her own screaming. On those nights, she would get out of bed and walk outside. She would sit on the porch of her little farmhouse and look up at the stars. There were so many of them, millions upon millions, scattered across the darkness like grains of rice on black cloth. Each one was a sun with its own planets, its own stories, its own creatures living and dying beneath its light. Somewhere out there, beings of every shape and size were going about their lives. Some of them had never heard of Earth or humans. Some of them remembered the old days when they ruled with fear and cruelty. Some of them were young, born after the change, who knew only peace. And all of them, whether they knew it or not, owed a small debt to a young woman who had chosen to suffer so that others would not have to. One night, about 12 years after her retirement, had a visitor. She heard the shuttle land in the field behind her house. She did not get up from her chair on the porch. She already knew who it would be. Ensign, now Captain, walked around the corner of the house. Her hair was gray now, and her face had new lines, but her eyes were the same, kind and bright and always a little bit worried. "Hello," she said softly. Smiled, "Hello, it has been a long time." Sat down in the chair beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. They just looked at the stars together, like they had done so many times before on the observation deck of Earth Station. "They want to name a ship after you," said finally. "The first of the new class of exploration vessels, the biggest and fastest ships ever built by humans." Laughed. It was a real laugh, warm and genuine. Tell them to name it after someone else. I was never the hero they think I was. Turned to look at her friend. Then what were you? Was quiet for a moment. A gentle wind rustled through the trees around her farm. In the chicken coop, one of the hens made a soft, sleepy sound. I was scared, said at last. Every second of those 37 minutes I was terrified. I wanted to give up. I wanted to let go and let the darkness take me, but I could not. Why not? Asked. Looked at her. Her eyes, which had seen so much pain, were calm and clear. Because I kept thinking about people like you, she said. About all the people on Earth Station who were watching. About all the children who would grow up in a galaxy ruled by fear if I failed. About my parents who died wanting a better future for me. She smiled softly. I did not endure because I was brave. I endured because I loved too much to let go. His eyes were wet. She reached out and took his hand in her own. That is what makes you a hero, she said. Not the pain you survived, not the intelligence you gathered. It is the love that kept you holding on when anyone else would have given up. They sat together in silence as the stars wheeled overhead. In the years that followed, lived quietly and died peacefully. She never returned to space. She never gave speeches or wrote books about her experiences. She just tended her farm, taught her students, and watched the stars at night. But her legacy lived on. In the great libraries of the Galactic Alliance, her story was recorded and preserved. In the academies of 100 worlds, young officers studied her sacrifice. And in the hearts of billions of beings across the galaxy, a simple truth remained. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or the most advanced, but they had something that no other race could match. They had the will to survive. Not despite their pain, but because of it. Not despite their fear, but through it. Every wound they suffered only made them more determined. Every loss they endured only made them fight harder. This was the lesson that had taught the galaxy. This was the gift she had given to every species that had ever doubted what humans could do. Survival was not their weakness. It was their oldest and greatest weapon. And the stars themselves would remember it forever.